Hello everyone, I'm Siddharthan. Welcome to my complete Python course. So this is the second video in my Python course, and in this video we will understand about Python, how it is different from other programming languages, and what are all the different applications that we have in Python, and also how different companies use Python for their product. I've also added a serial number in all these videos so that it's easy for you to track and kind of keep watching this in order. So this will be the agenda for today's video, and let's get started. So first, let's try to answer two questions. What is Python and why Python? So let's try to understand what is all about Python and why someone needs to learn Python if they are interested in programming stuff. So Python is a high-level programming language known for its simplicity and readability. First, let's try to understand what is meant by this high-level programming language. So usually we classify programming languages as high-level programming language and low-level programming language. So the name for this is due to its relationship with the machine language. So machine language is something that a processor understands or a computer understands. So all this programming that we do kind of gets converted to this machine language, and then it's executed on our computers or on our processors, right? So if you think about something like a C program, it's more closer to the machine language, but it's easier for humans to kind of quickly understand that. So it's basically closer to the machine language, but it's kind of far from what the humans can understand. In contrary, Python is kind of far from that machine language, which is later kind of converted into, but it's easily readable for humans. So that's why we call that as a high level programming language. So this is like a very simple explanation for that. Again, there are different layers to this, but you can understand it in this level, right? So it's a high level programming language, and because of that it's going to be easily readable and it's going to be simple. So it doesn't have like that much complex syntax and so on. So even you doesn't have this semicolons that you would see in other programming languages C. So it's like easily readable, and we have like simple syntax so that we can focus on the stuff that we are building instead of like focusing a lot on the syntax and the other other errors that we would get. And this is about like some history about Python. So Python was first created by Guido van Rossum. So this is the name of the person, and then it was first released in 1991. So previously we had a version called as Python 2, and later we currently are working with Python 3. And within Python 3 we have like different versions. So it started from 3.1, 2, and so on. And currently we are in 3.12. So by the time that I'm recording this video, so we are currently on 3.12. So now let's try to understand why someone needs to learn Python. Again, if they are interested in programming and other stuff. So it's not like Python is the best programming language. You shouldn't learn other programming languages or stuff like that. So it's not the case at all. So some applications or some use case that you're working in kind of works best with Python. So let's say that you want to become a machine learning engineer or a AI engineer. So in those fields, Python is like the main programming language that is used. So it's all depends on like what you want to kind of create. So if you're working on different domain, maybe that domain uses a different programming language. But in general, if you're starting to learn programming, then Python is going to be a very easier programming language to start with compared to C or Java or other languages, as again it's like a kind of an eye level and simple to read. So let's try to address these aspects. First is simplicity. As I said, it has a easier syntax and resembling English. It means like if you just look at a Python code, you can just read it and kind of understand it to an extent of what we are trying to do there. As we don't have any complex stuff around it, we don't have any complex syntax. It's going to be fairly simple compared to other language. And then we have this versatility aspect. So it supports different multiple programming paradigms. So we have this object-oriented type of programming where we kind of handle everything in terms of objects that we would see, and also like functional where we would kind of create these functions and so on. Again, procedural mainly focus on these functions and also the processes that we are following in the code. So all these are like a bit advanced, but you can just keep this in mind. So it kind of helps us to do this different types of programming within a particular code. And then we have extensive libraries, and this is a very main advantage in my aspect, or in my opinion I would say. So you don't have to build everything from scratch. So for most stuff we already have like pre-built libraries or packages. So if you think about NumPy, it works great with this arrays, or you can think about matrices. So for those matrix manipulation and so on, NumPy is going to be useful. And then we have pandas, which is for structured data manipulation like a CSV or Excel table or something. So pandas is going to be really helpful there. So similarly, for different aspects or different use cases, you have these several libraries or packages that you can use, so that basically your work is kind of simplified. So that's another main advantage, and the other one is community support. So it has like a large and active community. So if you're stuck somewhere, you're going to find some solution in the internet. So it's like a very great advantage when you're like, again, when you're stuck, you're definitely going to look up for some answers. And as Python has this greater community or larger community, you're eventually going to find your way out from that problem. So these are all some of the reasons on why you should consider learning Python. So that's about it. And now let's understand another critical concept of what is a compiler and what is an interpreter. So basically there are two types of, again, programming languages. So some programming languages are compiler based and other programming languages are kind of interpreter based. So this is the explanation. So when you take a compiler, it's going to translate the entire program into machine code before execution, as I said. So we have this machine code that's going to be executed, right? But both these programs will be right. So if you take about, let's say, if we talk about C or C++ as a compiler based language, and then Python, JavaScript, Ruby as interpreter based programming language, and let's say that you're writing 10 lines of code in C and another 10 lines of code in Python. So what a compiler is going to do is it's going to translate that entire 10 lines of code into machine code, and it's going to execute it at once. But in the case of a compiler based language, the code is going to be converted into machine code line by line, and it's going to execute the code line by line. So that's the main difference between them. So in the case of compiler, it's going to translate the entire thing and run all this thing at once. But in the case of compiler, or sorry, in the case of interpreter, it's going to do this translation and execution line by line. So that's the main difference. And examples of compiler based programming languages are C, C++, and for interpreter based languages, we have Python, JavaScript, Ruby, and so on. And there is an interesting point here. So if you think about Java is kind of mix of both. A part of Java, the execution of a Java program is kind of compiler based, and the other part is interpreter based, where it has this compiling phase and an interpreter phase. But let's not go there. You can just like have a simple understanding of compiler and interpreter for now. So that's fine for now. And if we talk about the advantages, so it's faster execution since translation happens. And as I said, the entire code is kind of translated only once, right? So the execution is definitely going to be faster, and you would have more control over your code. But in the case of interpreter, as it's kind of doing this, you know, as it's doing this translation one line after the another, it's going to, the execution is going to be slower, because again, for this real-time interpretation of like line by line and so on. And when we talk about the disadvantage, it's kind of takes more time to compile. Again, there's a difference between this compilation and the execution. So that's another intricate detail about that. But again, talking about disadvantage, it's going to be harder to debug as well, as like the entire thing is processed once, and you need to pay attention on the code that you're writing, and again the errors that you may face. But in the case of interpreter, right, it's easier debugging, as it kind of stops at the point where your code is wrong. So let's say you have 10 lines of code written and there is a error in the sixth line. So it's going to execute the first 5 lines and it's going to stop at the sixth line. And you have like amazing debugging capabilities in several IDs like PyCharm and other stuff, and it's going to be easier for you to debug as well. So again, this is an eye level introduction for this compiler and interpreter language. Just keep these things in mind. Again, this is not that important when it comes to this hands-on knowledge or the practice that you need to do with Python, but just like it's good to have this understanding of how it's different for a compiler based programming language and how it's different for an interpreter based programming language. So that is all should be the takeaway for this. So now let's understand about the different applications that we have in Python. So the first main application or the domain where we use Python a lot is artificial intelligence. Again, within artificial intelligence, we have several domains like machine learning, and then we have deep learning, and lately generative AI has been something that has kind of seen a boom, right? So all these domains uses Python a lot. So it comes to like processing the data, training the models, deploying this. So in all these aspects, Python is heavily used. And if you are someone who is just trying to get into this field of AI, machine learning, and all those things, then Python is going to be definitely useful for you. So I would say it would be kind of the starting phase for you before you get into AI. Before you go into the coding aspects of machine learning, you would probably start with Python programming. So I would say it's like very critical aspect of this particular field. And then we have web development. So there are different parts to web development. If you talk about backend part, we can use this different Python libraries like FastAPI, Flask, and other things to create this backend APIs. So we will also learn in this course of how you can create these APIs using these libraries and how you can build this interesting API. So for that purpose, this can be used. And then automation is another important aspect where Python is used. Like one specific automation is testing automation, where you can write scripts to test a particular application. So if you think about a company, so there will be like a team which develop the application, so what we call as a development team. And then there will be a team for, let's say, data engineering. There will be a team for a managerial team, and there will also definitely be this DevOps team, and also a testing team. So if you take this testing, there is a chance they also do this automation testing using Python and other tools as well. So that's one such examples of how Python can be used for automation, but it again can be used for other automation stuff that we can do. So basically to automate stuffs or automate processes using programming. Apart from this, also there are like several domains, like data analytics is something where we can use Python for analyzing the data, visualizing this. And then scientific computation, so let's say we need to do a lot of calculations, maybe math based or science based or something. So there also we have libraries and stuff that you can use in Python for these applications. So these are some of the main fields that uses Python a lot. And then if we talk about the companies, of course, we know everything that has something to do with AI, Gen AI, deep learning, machine learning definitely uses Python. And we know that OpenAI as GPT and ChatGPT applications, and which again starting from processing the data, training the models, deploying this, and kind of fine tuning. So in all these aspects, Python is used heavily. And when we talk about NVIDIA, so if you're someone who is kind of someone who kind of plays game a lot, you would have heard about this NVIDIA's DLSS, which is basically based on a deep learning screen rendering technique, where you would render this high resolution image from a low resolution image. Again, this is AI and deep learning related stuff, and this is also something that they would have built with Python. Again, we have autonomous cars with Tesla, and it also has a AI inbuilt to it, so it's something that kind of uses Python. And also we have Netflix recommendation system, which is like kind of an industry standard recommendation system. It's kind of good at what's the movie that you can watch. So all this recommendation core things are built with Python. And then we have Instagram also has this recommendation part of which post or which reel it's going to recommend to you. And also a lot of backend APIs are also built with Python. And again with Google also, again a lot of aspects of search engine would have kind of have Python. And also they also have their own AI and stuff. So before they had Google Assistant, and now they have Gemini and so on, right? So that's also somewhere Python is heavily used. So domain wise, AI is something where we kind of use Python a lot, and the other one is like web development, and backend API is something that you can look at for this Python application. So I hope that everyone kind of got an idea of what is Python, how this is like useful. Again, other programming language is also have their own advantages and also find their use as well, but Python also has its kind of share. So I don't want anyone to think that Python is superior to other languages or something. So that's definitely not the case, and it all comes down to what you're building and what language is best for that particular use case. So that's how we have to see it. So we shouldn't say that I'm a Python programmer and that's what I'm going to stick to. So we shouldn't restrict ourselves with that. So I just wanted to end with that particular note. So basically for learner, if you're just starting to learn with programming, I wouldn't recommend you to just start with C, because again there is a complexity of syntax and other things that you need to learn. But Python is really simple with that stuff. And once you understand the concepts of programming, let's say how does a loop work, how does a if condition works, or how does a function work. So if you're thorough with all those concepts, right, you can learn those concepts and implement that in Python. Now the concept is going to remain the same. Now when you move to other programming languages like C or Java, you just like replace those syntax with that particular programming language's syntax. So it's now easier. But if you just straight away start with C, it's going to be slightly tougher. It's not like you can't do it, but it's kind of easier when you start with Python. So that's why I wanted to end this video. So I hope that you have learned something from this, and I hope everyone is clear until this point. So I'll see you in the next upload. Thanks for watching.